Reactive Training Systems.
Hey guys, welcome to a new episode of the RTS podcast. I'm Gaby Muller, and today I'm sitting here together with Tuchscherer from RTS, Adam Jones, also from RTS, and we have a special guest, Mann from Australia, who is also the founder of Performotion. And I would say this is a very special episode, not only because I'm very proud that we got to schedule an appointment all together because we're from 4 different time zones. So in total, 18 hours set us apart, which is crazy that we made this work. So it's really cool. But also because for me personally, I worked with Kelly for a while as an athlete. And I can say that I learned a lot from Kelly, not only as an athlete, but also as a coach. I can definitely say that she impacted my coaching also up until this day, which is really cool. And then Kelly and Adam, you guys also know each other because
we do.
you both are from Australia. And also, it was in 2022 when one of you athletes competed against Adam. It was Kellen Gibbons in the 93 kilo class. Yeah, and Adam became the national champion. So it was a quite intense battle because there were only a few kilos apart.
That was a good session.
Exactly. So now we're really interested, Kelly, because you are from Performotion, and Performotion has seen an incredible growth in the past years. It's been massive, also just because of the your strong social media presence. This is actually how I found out about Performotion. It was, I believe, 2 years ago. Back then, I believe you guys also stood out in particular because you had a lot of strong benchers. I remember reading that you breed them, so I was like, damn, I have never exactly. But now I would say that it's an understatement to just say that you guys are known for having strong benches. You bring a lot of very unique characteristics to the coaching world. So Kelly, what would you say that makes Performotion stand out, and how has it changed over time?
That's a question and a half to answer at 8 o'clock in the morning. But I think the difference. I'm not sure. I don't want to say difference, but we do have quite a heavy biomechanics focus in terms of the way that we program, and I think myself, I've got a background as an exercise physiologist, so I think we're able to balance the delivery of volume and intensity really well, and I think that's helped to keep our athletes healthy for a long period. And we the coaches and the exercise physiologists still work quite closely together. So, and the exercise physiologists themselves all have a background in powerlifting themselves. So we don't really have that problem where, the athlete, if we do refer, the athlete goes out to a different practitioner and they're told something completely different, and which slows down the progress. So I think we've done that quite well. And I also think the coaches all have different views on how they deliver their program, but on the micro scale, but on the larger scale, we're all quite similar in how we deliver our programs. We do a lot of professional development together. So I think those two things have really helped. And I think being able to work, because most of us work in the same building, we've been able to work really closely together over a long period of time. And I think that's helped us to deliver a product that's quite standard across the whole of the business. So that's been one of the things that I think we've really achieved quite well. And then again, the exercise physiologists who are able to directly input into our programs with thinking specificity for powerlifting, which has been the other big thing. So it's helped athletes stay strong longer and stay healthy longer.
Yeah, it's taken seriously, the idea that you've got to stay healthy and train hard for a long time to lots of people say that, but to put action behind it, I think is I mean, that's what you would like to see. That's really cool. And I would agree that gives you guys kind of a unique position in powerlifting. I'd love to, if you don't mind, just jumping right into the deep end. So I've got the best time zone out of everyone here, so I don't mind jumping into the deep end. But you mentioned kind of a biomechanics focus. Do any examples of that come to mind? Like when you say, that you guys have a biomechanics focus in terms of how you prescribe volume and intensity, like what might that look like in practice?
Okay, so I guess we're looking at structuring the microcycle, and we're looking at structuring the microcycle to keep the athlete fatigue in the place that we need it. So I guess with us, we're kind of looking at how the body moves and maintaining center of mass throughout not only the microcycle but also throughout the block. So it's just making sure that we've got the non-negotiables in the program. So if we're looking at a lifter who might bias towards being extended, they might lose hip extension really quickly. So we would make sure that we had variations in their program, in their accessories that helped them to train that area. So they're able to, lift the loads that they need to without, not without, but keep them healthier in those positions, if that makes sense, because powerlifting is a very big position sport. We have 3 different positions we need. We need a lot of hip extension, we need a lot of shoulder flexion, we need a lot of hip flexion, we need a lot of shoulder extension. So making sure that those those ranges of motion are looked after with each athlete, because each athlete will bias towards having one more over the other. Now, some are lucky and they've just got the best range of motion ever, but load kind of doesn't favor range of motion. So ensuring that the micros set up. So, so for someone like Gaby, she's squatting on a Monday, making sure that she's okay for bench on the Tuesday. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So things like that. And it means that you can go down a rabbit hole with it, but if you keep it simple, or when we know that all powerlifters need to hinge, they all need to squat, and they all need to be able to press, right? So if you keep it simple and you press and you do those 3 things in different ranges of motion, you're pretty sweet. And that's pretty much it. And that's like putting the simple focus on it. Yeah, so that's kind of how we look at it. You can we went down a rabbit hole with it. We went down PRI. We went down Bill Hartman's model. We did all those things. And, now we've brought it back to making sure that, your RP is right, percentage drops are right, and, you've got the accessories in there that the athlete needs and the athlete wants for those types of, and then ensuring that you're just looking at center of mass. So if you're looking at someone's center of mass and it's not where it needs to be, there's some type of range that's missing. So just being able to assess that is important for us.
Right. Yeah. I'm very impressed that you still remember my my schedule, my training schedule. But yeah, but it's very clear that you have a very unique viewpoint when it comes to exercise selection, and it's also obvious that it got influenced by the physiologists that you're working with, because you guys all work together. Exactly. But I'm always very interested in keeping things simple. Like, it's not always possible because everyone is so unique and individual. But when it comes to the exercises that you use, you can influence the center of mass. The center of mass gets influenced also by the loads in the training from your main lifts. The main lifts, but the main lifts also get influenced from the exercises that you do, and that can be in a good way. It can also be in a bad, like negative way. You have those different kind of priorities in a week, for example, we have secondary squats, you have the main squats, and you absolutely want to make sure that the main squats are dialed in and locked in and feel good or just are strong. But when you try to keep the athlete healthy or just bias their center of mass, how do you know how heavy the athlete can do those kind of exercises?
Well, it's a bit of it depends question, but it's all about execution. So it's like anything, you want progressive overload and you still want progressive overload with the accessories that they're doing. So it would just depend on asking them to send you a video. And if you feel that if I feel that they're executing it quite well, I'll let it go. But it's like, in my point of view, in my idea, the accessories that you're putting in the program, no matter if they're to keep the athlete healthy or to grow muscle, they still need to be progressed. And it's just making sure that you're looking at that rate of progression and getting feedback from the athlete. So if I put something in the program that I know is going to help their center of mass and it's still not working, I will ask to see it. And 9 times out of 10, it's just an execution problem, which will need some cueing and, the same as anything else would need.
Do you have any examples of that?
So if you've got an athlete who's a big conventional deadlifter and, they have lower back weakness and they're pulling from the ground, and because their lower back is weak, they're falling into their heels and they can't lock the bar out, right? So that's a big example. So that might have a roll-on effect to their squats where they might lose hip extension or hip flexion. So then they end up not being able to produce force through the ground. So that athlete's going to have like usually a Romanian deadlift in their program. So that Romanian deadlift is going to need to be progressed at the correct rate of progression for that athlete, so they can train their lower back, so they can stay in the center of mass, so they can stay over the bar, so they get good hip internal rotation, external rotation, because that's what a hinge promotes, right? So I would look at their Romanian deadlift and ask them to send it to me, because if they're still rounding in their lower back and they still can't hold that hinge position, they're going to need to learn how to do it properly with that before they can do it at the same time with a conventional. Rather than me spending hours and weeks trying to cue the conventional, they just need to get better at hinging in general.
Yeah, I like that idea of
example.
Oh, that's a great one. It's like breaking the movement down. Is a criticism that you hear? Well, I don't know about criticism, but it's a comment that I hear powerlifters make sometimes about powerlifting movements being super simple movements, and they are to an extent. But the task of lifting a maximum weight is still, it's still a challenge from a technical standpoint. We see that all the time. And you can break the task down into smaller components if you're struggling with, like your example says, it is more of a lockout position than breaking that movement down and practicing the thing that you need to practice in isolation is a, time-tested sports development tactic. I think that makes sense. It's something that I think a lot of people miss.
Well, you could see Adam is a great example. He's got excellent center of mass. And you can always tell that when you're going head to head with Adam, you know that he's going to be able to squat and pull something big because he can hold his center of mass. So, and then if someone has to pull their last deadlift and their center of mass is a bit iffy, it's like, oh, you know what I mean? Like, do I put that? You've got to put it on the bar, but like you can see with Adam when he squats from the side.
Seeing that affects like how you're seeing the the RPE of the lift, to maybe not exactly that, but like how much a lifter has in reserve.
Yeah. You're looking at that. You're looking at bar speed. You're looking at whether or not they can stay under the bar. You're looking at what their push looks like, and that definitely helps you determine how much the lifter's got in the tank. Like if I remember back to the nationals with Adam, he missed his second attempt. He missed, I think. And it was because he fell backwards. So, and then came out and pulled something and won. Yeah. So that was just the center mass not being right, and so he was able to put more on the barbell.
I feel like this is the perfect example of showing that understanding the movement, because it is a very simple movement, but actually understanding what's happening can be a real strength as a coach. But I feel like there's also a lot of coaches or physios that fall into that rabbit hole of trying to overanalyze everything, and then at some point they forget the main point, which like the most important point, which is actually to just lift. At the end of the day, if you're powerlifting, the goal is to get stronger, so you have to squat a certain amount of weight, and also work on a skill. So how do you do that for like to work with physiologists and that with injured athletes, and not fall down into this rabbit hole of, okay, we need to be overly careful? Because when I was injured, I remember that I could all of a sudden 100 kilos bench was a struggle, and I felt like I just couldn't bench. And you never gave me the impression of, okay, you need to take a step back. I went to a physiotherapist in Luxembourg and I got told, you absolutely need to stop benching for a few days and then ease back into it. And I was like, holy shit, but I have a competition going on. You told me, no, you keep going. We're going to work with a physiologist and it's going to be okay. And it ended up being okay. So how do you go to that rabbit hole?
So it actually ended up when I started really getting into powerlifting coaching, I was still practicing it as an exercise physiologist. And I found, so I had some athletes who I was coaching, and then some other athletes who I was just rehabbing, and some athletes that I was trying to do both. And I found, and this was back in 2021. And I found that I was doing a very mediocre job at both. So I decided, and Tom was also, so Tom's exercise physiologist here, he started with me at Perf from the day one, and we just started growing. So, and then we kind of like just kept going with powerlifting. And then Tom was coaching, and he was also doing a mediocre job at both. I really fell into I really liked the programming. I really liked coaching. I really liked going to competitions. Tom was the complete opposite. He really liked problem solving and really liked rehabbing. So we just literally sat down and went, we need to split the business. So we split the business, and there's 4 exercise physiologists and 7 coaches. I have a hard, I will do what I just told Mike before. That's it. I will not do anything more than that, because if I do, I get stuck in a rabbit hole. And I'm a big believer in do what you're good at. And if you're not good at it, give it to somebody else. So then from that time, now I'm a powerlifting coach. I'm not an exercise physiologist anymore. So if I have a athlete with something where I'll let it go for like 1 to 2 weeks. I'll give them something on their exercises. I'll check their accessories, but I'm not going to prescribe rehab exercises anymore, because it's not my thing. And I feel like if I was to do that, then I wouldn't be able to focus on the program that I'm actually running. And for me as a powerlifting coach, we have one job, that is to make our athletes stronger, and that's all I'm going to focus on. So that's how that runs with us. That's why with you, I'm like, come on, no, we're still benching.
Do you find your background that biases some of your exercise selection as well? Like, but with powerlifting specific.
Not anymore. It used to, but now that I work so closely with Steve, and he's so far down the powerlifting, not anymore. And because I work more with the higher level guys, I can't do that, because at the end of the day, we got a SBD.
But if an athlete had an issue, like some minor issue or whatever, then you would lean towards that. Like, do you find that with that background kind of benefits you in some way?
I definitely understand. Yeah, I definitely understand movement, and I can definitely see movement, and that is from the background. But that also, I don't think that's university. I think any coach can learn that if they really put their mind to it. So the background, the big influences obviously were other guys like Bill Hartman, the guys who really explain movement really well and also explain how to load it really well. Any coach can do those things. And I believe these days, with how saturated the coaching industry is, if you're a coach and you don't understand basic biomechanics and you're not able to look at movement from the midline out, then it's something that you should learn, because if you can really understand that, then your programming skills will improve, because you'll be able to understand what joint that you're training and how that relates to SBD. So I think uni laid the foundation of that for me, like laid anatomy and laid joints, but it's not something that I don't think that that's a special thing. I think anyone can learn that if they really want to.
It sounds like that came most professional development stuff anyway.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So one of the good things about the EPs that have the background in powerlifting is they explain everything from a powerlifting perspective, because powerlifting is not a throwing sport or it's not a running sport. So biomechanics in the sport's different, right? So everything that we learn from them is directly related to powerlifting, not global biomechanics.
Yeah, it's really powerful to be able to understand the movements, because it just expands your toolbox. And if you have a big toolbox, then you have way more ways to be creative as a coach and be able to offer an individualized experience to your athletes. But I have to say that you definitely influence, I would say, exercise selection, exercise variation in general, because today when I was in the gym, it was like 2 hours ago, I saw an athlete doing toe elevated deadlifts or toe elevated stiff legs. And I was like, you are coached by someone from Performotion, by Stephen Day. Yeah.
That's
really
good.
Cool
so
to see that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, when Steve came on at Perth, he's very much down the powerlifting focus and we were down biomechanics. So we've been able to merge the two. And then he's started to bring those things in his programming because it keeps the athletes healthy. But that's Bill Hartman. That's Bill Hartman stuff. He's the guy who's the hinging with toe elevation and heel elevation, depending on what range of motion you're missing or what you need to gain. So that's where the influence is on that. I don't think he pioneered that. We're just taking that and putting it into powerlifting. But as I said before, you've got to be careful on how far down that rabbit hole you go, because it is a rabbit hole.
I heard you mention something just a few minutes ago. We were talking about microcycles and trying to set up the microcycle in a certain way. And, Gaby mentioned, kind of prioritizing the primary days. I listened to a couple podcasts that you were on. I think they were your podcasts actually, but one of the ideas I heard you talking about was this idea of a golden micro. And it sounds similar to some of the things that we do in terms of our setup. So I was wondering if you could kind of describe what a golden micro is and how you use it.
Well, I think it's probably directly derived from stuff that you've been putting out, Mike.
That's cool. I never want to assume that, but that is neat.
Yeah. So it's just looking at when the athlete, it's obviously looking at things like, your variables, volume and intensity, frequency, and you're setting up the week in a way where the athlete is feeling strongest on the days that they need to be the strongest. And you're controlling the days that need to be controlled to make sure that the athlete is their strongest on those days. That's it. And then that helps you peak and taper, because you can see days in between lifts. You can see which days are stronger, and getting really good at it. When you become quite advanced at it, you can predict how the athlete is going to feel on each day. And then that can, if you have hiccups or injuries or missing days or having to compete midweek, understanding the athlete's microcycle helps you to peak and taper without needing to rip everything apart. that's pretty much it.
That's
I feel
cool.
like it's so valuable to find that as a coach, because once you found it, you can, like, you have the key, you have everything you need,
Yeah.
and you can manipulate it. Because what I like to do is, once I find it, I don't like to do a lot of changes from block to block.
Yep.
And the changes that I do, I know exactly afterwards if they worked or not. If they worked, that's even better, because then we can improve it over time. If they didn't work,
Yep.
then we learn something new again. So it's always useful data. But I was wondering if you ever completely deviate from the golden micro, because it can change over time, but sometimes athletes also just need variety in their program.
Yeah, I do, but I'll keep the basic structure pretty similar. In terms of, I'll ask the athlete how far away, how much deviation do you want? If it's something 100% completely different, it's like you have that conversation, whether or not, otherwise I'm just changing variations. I'm changing rep schemes. I'm changing those types of things with the idea of I'm making my way back to that golden microcycle when we're ready to go. But I understand that sometimes things change, and how you make your way back there can also influence how the micro is running. So, I think all changes are a little bit risky, but, if you make the changes and understand how you're going to get back there, I think that's okay.
Yeah, this is interesting to me. One of the things I've been dabbling with more lately is, I guess, using a bit more variation from block to block in the weekly schedule, I would say. I've always kind of done something similar to what we're talking about here. You find something that's working and more or less stick with it. If the block is more hypertrophy focused, then I'm still sticking with it. But lately, I've been trying to include a bit more variation in that weekly structure as well. Like, just to give you an example, I've thought in my last structure block was kind of geared toward hypertrophy a little bit. I noticed I was making compromises in the squat training in order to preserve the deadlift training. So just with the position of things throughout the week, I would do some things that were maybe fine from a skill development standpoint, but maybe not ideal from a structural stimulus standpoint. In order to still perform well in the deadlift a few days later. And I thought, well, if I switch that around and just did a SBD day, which is definitely not typical for me, that would, get that skill stimulus out of the way at this one point in the week and leave the rest of the week wide open. That would be a pretty big departure from, what I'm used to. So, just as an example that came to top of mind, I've found myself kind of messing around with more stuff like that, more changes in the weekly rhythm of things.
Yeah, I think if you once you really understand what your athlete or yourself can handle in terms of changes, it does make it easier to make changes. And I think that also comes back to communication with the athlete, how reliable the athlete is with their RPEs and their own recovery. That allows you to make more easier changes on the spot. So an example for me is I have an athlete who I've coached for a long time. We've always just done safety bars in the middle of the week. And it got to the point where it was just like 2 sets of 7, same load. And he was like, can I not do these now? And I was like, you know what? Yeah, sure, that's fine. It's made absolutely no difference. So, because I know him for so long, it just ended up just being stimulus. It was just there.
Yeah.
And it's made absolutely no difference to performance. So though when you get to know an athlete, or Mike, yourself really well, you're able to make those changes knowing that they're not going to cause any problems. But if you've got an athlete who, doesn't fill out their spreadsheet as much, doesn't tell you what they feel themselves as much, it's like, You can try, but I
Right.
don't know. You know.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, the information flow is critical. I don't know what the deal is today. All my examples are about myself, so I'm having a self-centered kind of day, I guess.
it's okay.
But it makes me think of you were talking about like understanding what the limitations are. That's another kind of idea I've been playing with. My lower body training in particular seems to be constrained a lot by how much it's what I've been calling like spinal shear load that I can tolerate.
Yeah.
That anything that puts me in a forward lean position. So, if you could organize training around that. Like it doesn't necessarily have to be squats and deadlifts or even like a muscle group, delineation. It could be, other ways of organizing it.
Yeah, definitely. So you can't heavy hinge.
I can, but I just need to be mindful of how much of it I'm doing throughout the week. And I've been carefully kind of titrating it up for a while now, but it's still not much.
That's fine. I found that's fine, and you're still a huge deadlifter. So you found the intensity and the volume you need to be able to continue to deadlift without your spine exploding.
Yeah. I mean, it does create some interesting problems, right? Like I know that I would like to do more work on spinal erectors, but I'm consuming all of that spinal shear volume in the week training the competition squat and deadlift. So you go, well, how do you choose an accessory exercise for spinal erectors that doesn't involve flexing or extending your spine at all? They're like, well, you're kind of constrained in some weird ways with that. But I think the medium-term answer is just to work on increasing that capacity so you can tolerate more,
That's where I just
like, how do you train your biceps if you can't flex your elbow? Like, well, you kind of can't,
Nah, isometrics.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of where front squats have been. We're going to do a long segment here on helping me in my training, which I appreciate. But that's where front squats have been really helpful for me. It's just, it seems like having the load somewhat in front, spinal erectors seem to get a pretty good stimulus from it. It has more carryover to my deadlift than it does to my squat.
Yeah. Makes sense with the way that you lift.
Yeah.
Which is good.
But it's also interesting because, Mike, you have the track R sheet, which helps you in your decision making. And it basically breaks down training into like all of the muscles, all of the different stressors. Whereas it's really individualized. Whereas Kelly, you also offer individualized training, but when I looked at your training sheet, it's actually very simple compared to most coaches. Like a lot of coaches have like all of the fancy stuff. They have the graphics. It looks really nice, but it doesn't mean that you have any less of an overview, because you have a pretty good overview of what kind of loads and what kind of progress is going on in your athlete's training journey. So how did you come up with this? Like, because you're also not using, you're not even using estimated run rep maxes, for example.
I just think it's just a different way. I think some coaches and programs like to have all the tracking stuff. I think for us, we do focus on, and I think it's just a different way of retaining information. It's definitely the athletes who fill out their sheet with us and who are honest with their RPEs and who communicate really well are the ones that do quite well. And that's like with any coach. We do have an updated sheet now where the athlete will report how they're feeling going into the session, which is just sleep, nutrition, readiness to train, those types of things. If the coach wants to use E1RM, they're more than welcome to do it. So I think just for us, we focus a little bit more on the feedback directly from the athlete. And if we need information around tracking, we'll get that in the ways that suits us suits the coaches individually, if that makes sense. Personally, if I had a lot of tracking on my coaching sheet, I would personally get quite overwhelmed with how I would program then, because too much information. I get overwhelmed with too much information at me. That's just me personally. So I prefer to break down the information. I think you and I worked through that a little bit too, Gaby. I prefer to break down the information and hypothesize in my head things, and that's just the way that I work. So if I had a lot of data, I think that it would take me a long while to decipher through all of it, and I probably wouldn't be able to handle more than 25, 30 athletes. That makes sense.
Yeah, and also,
but I see the value. I see the value in it, though. Like, I definitely see the value in tracking that stuff. I think all coaches track it. We just track it in different ways, if that makes sense.
yeah, and you also need to know how to use it. For example, with the
Yes.
estimated run rep max, it's very individualized. So in the beginning, when you start working with an athlete, you still need to get to know them. Track all of the data. But I remember that at some point we started talking about the load drops, because you tend to prescribe load drops based on the top sets, right? So load that you did for the top set. There are plenty of different ways to prescribe load drops. For example, you can also just work with, let's say, 75% based on the estimated run rep max. So what do you see as an advantage on doing load drops directly based on the top set loads compared to?
I think from, if you're looking at an auto regulation perspective, if some athletes, so the top set might have a top set of triple and the back down fives, and would load drop from that back down fives. It's just pretty much ends up exactly the same as doing it from an E1RM. But it allows the athlete to auto-regulate that top set a little bit more, I think. But in saying that, the more athletes that I work with over time, I'm using percentage drops, and I'm using things like that in programming a lot differently for each athlete. Does that make sense? So some athletes will do straight sets with, some I won't use a low drop at all. So I think it's the same concept. It's just looked at in a different way. Does that make sense? And it allows the athlete to auto-regulate over not so much the first top set, but the second top set. That makes sense.
I think you end up in a fairly similar place.
Place, yeah.
Yeah, you put the right weight on the bar and lift it the right number of times. I had a bit of a misadventure doing that, some time ago. I guess maybe I still do this to people sometimes, but the way I think about it is as a percent of 1RM. So I know that I want them to train at whatever percent of 1RM. And I thought at some point that a way to make this easier for them would be to just have the load drop listed there. But the way I did it is now I've got 2 percentages written down on the paper, and I should have not done that. I should have only written down 1. But it does make it easier on the end user, I think, if you can kind of save them the extra step.
Definitely, yeah. I think, and at the end of the day, as I've said a couple of times in this podcast, it does rely on the athlete being honest with their RPEs on both the top set and using the E1RM. So if you've got an athlete that's constantly overshooting their top set, that percentage drop on the E1RM can be a bit skewed. But if they're constantly overshooting their top set and their second top set, it's still skewed. So it'll at the end of the day, it does come back to how reliable the athlete is with their RPEs.
How precise do you need them to be with it? Like, what do you like to? I mean, obviously, the more accurate, the better. But
well, it depends, because you got to take into consideration their recoverability, size, gender. Size is a big one. the tolerance. So obviously some athletes can get away with it more than others. And I like when the athlete rates their actual RP really accurately. That is really good. I've got the guy that took the SSBs out, he's been rating his actual RP really good for years. So that's where I knew how I knew we could do that. So if I've got an athlete that does that really well, then I find that quite easy to work with, because then you can see the fatigue throughout the week. But in terms of generally, like, it's not going to stop me from progressing the program.
Yeah.
Maybe in the past, but not now.
Yeah.
But this also requires a lot of communication, right? To also get to know your athletes, know how they live, know how things feel, in order to give a good feedback on, their loads decision making.
Yeah,
that's true.
For sure.
But when it comes to communication, something that you guys also offer is a very high reactivity. So you have different kinds of coaches. Every coach has a different communication style. So this is something that in particular also interests me a lot, because from some coaches you hear that they ghost their athletes for like a few weeks. Others respond on a daily basis. So what is your communication style?
We have a 24-hour communication feedback. I work with a lot of international athletes, so I'm quite busy in the mornings. So I'll spend the mornings responding to my guys that have trained last night. I think one of the big traps that we did fall into, which I think a lot of coaches have fallen into, would be not having their boundaries set. So when they're responding, they're actually working. So I make sure now that when I'm responding, I don't respond on my phone anymore. I respond on my computer only. So that helps me to set those boundaries so the expectations are set there with the athlete. We're usually responding within 12 to 14 hours, and our responses are reactive. Sometimes some athletes might catch me on my computer while I'm training, so the response will be quite quick. But we make sure now that we explain that that's not an expectation, and that gives the coaches time. It gives me time to be able to put my thoughts together and actually open the program at the time that I'm looking. I don't know about you guys, but I think online coaching in the last couple of years has really developed in terms of communication with expectations, because we've had a lot of athletes that have come to us saying that the communication with their coach wasn't what they needed. But I think most coaches who have a roster that's quite full now put those communication boundaries up early and set those expectations so that they're able to deliver the product that they want to. And I think that's where we're at a lot now, because most of our coaches are over around 40 athletes and above. So having those expectations is super important. Whereas when we first started, we didn't have those expectations down as much because we were just learning how to be really good online coaches, if that makes sense. I think you can still be reactive with a program, even if you haven't responded within 12 hours. I think if you really take the time to understand your programming and you really take the time to know the principles of what you're delivering to the athlete, you can be reactive in a couple of days' time, if you need to change something within that week. Obviously, tapering is a little bit different. So, if we're tapering an athlete, I'm probably going to have them on top of my response list for that day. And I think that's just organization, really, time management as a coach.
Yeah, and also teaching the athlete to be more self-reliant as well when they get in certain situations, that teach them that they can steer themselves in a direction where they need to go with their training rather than relying on an instant response.
Yes, big time.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
There are
kind
different
of autonomies.
ways.
Go ahead, Gaby.
There are different ways of. Sorry. there are different ways of communication. That's for sure. Like there's no
Yeah.
in particular right or wrong. So
No.
definitely legit if you are someone that likes to reply on a daily basis. It also works if you reply after a few days or just do weekly check-ins. I think
Yeah.
the most important thing is that it needs to be sustainable for the coach and also consistent.
Yes.
Like consistency is a big thing because what I
Yes.
see with a lot of coaches, especially part-time coaches that have a main job and they just do coaching on the side and they just have a couple of athletes like below 10 or so. They do it for fun.
Yeah.
They can be quite reactive and they can give like all of their attention to those athletes because it's not a
Yes.
lot of work. But then at some point, maybe their priorities shift. Something's going on in
Yes.
their life or just job related or whatever, and they start to communicate less. And that's when the frustration increases of the athletes. And that's when they might consider switching to another coach just because
Yes.
it's not consistent. So I think
And I think, yeah, and I think I fell into that trap as well. I think now it's about making sure that I'm treating which the coaches are treating their job seriously. I think, and having set times where the coaches. I have set times when I respond. Now I have set times when I program, and making sure that those are upheld big time.
yeah, that's a
But I
great.
get.
Yeah, I really like that idea, by the way, of responding on your computer versus your phone. That
Well,
Yeah.
I get overstimulated really quickly. So if I'm on my phone scrolling for a long period of time, I will not sleep properly, and I fell into that trap. So and then for me, it feels like I'm getting more done if I'm doing it at my computer. Obviously, you can have WhatsApp open on your computer. It feels like more of a job and not just on the fly. Because, everyone has a different style of how they text. And if you're my friend, I'll text you. I'm very direct. And so if I'm on my computer, I can say what I'm needing to say a little bit more because I'm just typing. My thumbs aren't doing all the work. And then you can bring the program up at the same time and you can look at that and you're programming at the same time you're talking to someone. And then, one of the biggest issues of coaching in general is switching off. So once I put my laptop away now, I'm thinking about programs or programming less. I'm thinking about more overarching things, if that makes sense. That's just a learning thing.
Yeah, it's so good that you developed this kind of strategy over time. I feel like it's something that a lot of coaches have to go through. I, for example, in the beginning, when I started coaching, of course, like you're super engaged, you just put all of your passion into coaching, but it needs to be sustainable, right? And at some point I found myself still working when I was laying in bed because I was on my phone. I got the notification and immediately my brain would start to work like, okay, how can we go on about this? And then I started to answer. But if you keep doing this for a long time, you will burn out. Exactly. And it's just a matter of time. So really figuring out as a coach on how to set the boundaries, because online coaching is so vague. Like you can just work whenever you want to. So if you don't set any boundaries yourself, who will do it for you? Because obviously like athletes are always happy the more answers they can get. So you need to definitely come up with a boundary. It's
I think
also good for the athletes.
I think it's about understanding the athletes that you're working with. So if that happens with me, I'll talk the athlete through it. And I'm pretty big now on not selecting, but taking on people that I know that my personality will work well with. Because at the end of the day, we can't really change ourselves to work around each other. It's like a relationship, right? So there's only so far that you can bend yourself one way until it's like, I can't do this anymore. So understanding the types of athletes that you work well with is really important. And obviously, the ups and downs, you're not going to have a perfect relationship with your athletes for forever. But it's being able to communicate that. Like one thing that I do is I have all my athletes on my close friends story on my Instagram. So if I'm handling all weekend or I'm sick or I can't respond, I will put on my close friends that I'm the expectations, and then that really helps. So like, for instance, this year when we'll all probably be in Lithuania, I'll say that I'm in Lithuania and I'm not going to be responding between these times. And if there's people in general that aren't able to work with that, then they're not the right athlete fit. They'll need a coach who's not in Lithuania, and that's and that's okay, like that's cool. And it's just understanding that. I think a lot of, and we're all coaches here, so when an athlete leaves, we're all like, oh, but the more you coach, the more you understand that people, it's the relationship. If it's not meant to be, it's not meant to be, and not taking things personally if you're not able to deliver the product that they need, because it doesn't matter who you are. If they need a product that your systems don't deliver, then it's not going to work out long term.
You got to have a system, and you can only flex that system so much before it starts to impact, you and everyone else that is connected to you in different ways. So that makes sense.
But it's great to hear that you're going to Lithuania.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Because
we've got a new federation over here now, so we're all happy.
Yeah, exactly. Because I remember last year, like Adam and you, Kelly, you guys actually had a lot of trouble. You still traveled to Malta, but you weren't able to coach your athletes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was very frustrating.
That was me. But things are looking up now, and we're all happy with where we're going, and the people that are involved in the new federation are very progressive, and everyone, the Australian team this year, should have a really good time.
It's been about a rough decade for Australian powerlifting, I think. So you guys are definitely due to have things settle down and have some really good experiences. So I'm happy to hear that things are looking up.
We're not here to get into the politics, though. we just want to coach and lift.
Yeah, that's all that matters, really. But I can only say that, like, from Europe, we guys are watching you, and we just hope that you guys finally find your home and can stay in this federation, because it's annoying.
Yeah, I think the guys. I think we're onto a good thing over here now. I think people are proudly repping the APA shirts, and they're proudly. I think we're going to have a lot of volunteers. I think powerlifting in Australia is going to grow again, and we're going to have a lot more competitions, because we were really starved for local competitions last year, particularly after Worlds. There was, you count the amount of local IPF competitions here on one hand, maybe two. And I think, Perth in general, one of my coaches, David Hoffman, has already put his hand up to be the meet director. So we've already got someone here who wants to meet direct, whereas for APU, we only ran one competition, and then were booted.
What you said before, there wasn't many local competitions, but there was a lot of competitions at that higher level where athletes that were competing internationally would have to compete 3-4 times a year. And and everyone was getting pretty burnt out and beat up
big time. Can you imagine going to local, state, nationals, then worlds?
Yeah. I'm getting close to being a Masters 1, and I'm really starting to feel it. So maybe in my 20s I could probably cope with that, but nah, not now.
Having to make weight 4 times a year.
You make weight, peak.
Oh,
yeah.
God. Yeah.
It's not good.
No, not good.
But yeah, I can back you on that. It sounds like a lot of people are very excited for the new federation. They're repping the shirts, and it's kind of bring that spark back into Australian powerlifting, where everyone was kind of just getting a bit over it, and now it's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
so
That's
exciting.
great to
times.
hear, and I'm looking forward to seeing some of the raucous Aussie teams come back where you guys bring the inflatable kangaroos and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be fun.
All right. So thank you for coming, for taking the time. Adam, thanks for waking up so early. Yeah, Mike, for
Thanks
you.
for having
I'll
us
settle
on.
down now.
Yeah, definitely. Kelly, it was good to meet you and compare notes on coaching with you. It's
Yeah.
always a pleasure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to meeting you properly in person in Lithuania.
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely. It's going to be great.